So the first in-person meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US Vice President Kamala Harris happened in Washington. The meeting was very cordial. There were very warm vibes on display between both the leaders. The very fact that this meeting happened and passed off so well in and of itself must be a remarkable feat for diplomats on both sides, because let's not forget, Prime Minister Modi and Vice President Harris come from two different political schools of thought, if it were. Kamala Harris represents what is called the progressive wing of the Democrat Party. That's a left-leaning political party in the US. Prime Minister Modi, of course, is seen as a right of center leader here in India. So for the both of them to come together on this global stage and the warm vibes that were on display was quite remarkable in and of itself. Also, the Prime Minister referring to Kamala Harris's story, her individual story, as being a very inspiring one for not just Americans but also Indians as well. So that was a nice personal touch from the Prime Minister. And similarly, from the Vice President's side, for Kamala Harris to say and to acknowledge and thank India for supplying vaccines as well as other needs to the United States when the US was going through the worst of COVID. The Prime Minister also acknowledged similar help from the United States when India was going through its second wave. So I think there was a lot of personal touch from both leaders. And I think at the end of the day, diplomacy, when you strip it off all the official language and the pomp and ceremony, it actually boils down to these personal touches, these gestures that leaders make for each other. Like Vice President Kamala Harris said, they will always remember, ordinary Americans will always remember the help that India extended last year when the US was facing the brunt of COVID. And of course, similarly, India will also remember all the help extended by the Biden administration when India was facing the deadly second wave a few months ago. So I think diplomacy at the end of the day will be remembered for these personal touches. But talking about substance, and there was something very, very substantial that happened in that meeting, something which I think even the Indian diplomats there were taken by surprise just a bit, when Vice President Kamala Harris suo motu took up the issue of Pakistan and Pakistan-based terror groups and Pakistan giving safe sanctuary to many of these groups. She in fact went on to say that Pakistan needs to act against these groups in the interests of India. Not only has this been, very publicly raised by the US Vice President, so far the highest individual authority in the United States to raise this issue, because this has been a bugbear for India for a number of years, in fact a number of decades now, that there are Pakistani groups that are operating from that land, from that soil, and targeting both Indian nationals as well as Indian assets, not just here on the mainland, but also Indian assets around the world. When we had substantial assets in Afghanistan, for example, they were a constant target for these jihadi groups. So the fact that Kamala Harris suo motu took this up and raised this was something that the Indian side will be very pleased about, so much so that the Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla mentioned that Kamala Harris had suo motu taken up the issue of Pakistan-based terror groups and the safe sanctuary that the establishment in Pakistan is giving to these groups. So the naming and shaming, I think, was a one big box ticked as far as India is concerned. What is also happening as far as the Western front for India is concerned is I think the American establishment is finally realizing the double game that Pakistan has been playing, which is why, and it perhaps explains why, so far in the 8 or 9 months that Joe Biden has been president, he has not made a single phone call to the Pakistan Prime Minister. I mean, just think about that for a second. You've had one of the most tumultuous events play out in this region over the last few weeks and months, and you have not had a phone call between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Pakistan. And I think that is telling. In fact, that is something that Imran Khan even referred to his interview with CNN, where he said that maybe Mr. Biden is busy, but I think he was betraying that sense of being let down by the Biden administration. And I think the Biden administration is finally waking up to a reality which even presidents before him knew. It was not like Barack Obama did not know. It was not like President Bush did not know about how the Pakistanis were using American money but at the same time giving safe sanctuary to many of these Pakistani groups, these terrorist groups, which would target not just Afghanistan, which would destabilize not just Afghanistan, but also other countries in the region, most notably India. So that is something that has finally been acknowledged, I think, by a US presidency. What it may translate into in terms of concrete action against Pakistan? Well, right now Pakistan has been kept in the doghouse. The absence of that phone call between the two leaders, that is evidence of the fact that Pakistan has been put on notice. But what may it translate to eventually? I think that's something that's going to be very interesting to watch out for. But on the Eastern Front, and this is where the dynamics get very, very interesting, because India has also long realized that the bigger threat is actually from the Eastern/Northern Front in the form of China. Pakistan is a threat that we can and we have learned how to deal with. I think the announcement a few days ago of AUKUS, which is Australia, UK and the United States, a security pact, a military pact, whereby the United States will be supplying nuclear-powered submarines to Australia. The British will be housing their submarines in a base in Australia. I think that has kind of drawn Quad also into sharper focus, because many are asking questions: why such high grade technology transfer and military cooperation with just Australia and the UK? Why not with Quad? Now, here's the interesting thing, that as far as Quad is concerned, the United States, India, Japan especially, have all made it very clear that they don't see Quad as any kind of military or security alliance. It is coming together of like-minded countries, 4 big democracies, whose common interests, one big common interest, is in keeping the Indo-Pacific open. Whether that's going to be backed by any kind of military treaty, I don't think that's a bridge that India wants to cross as of now, and certainly I don't think Japan wants to cross that as of now either. Which is why when the White House spokesperson was asked about whether AUKUS can be expanded in the future, whether India and Japan can be brought under that umbrella, whether AUKUS can become, JAUKUS or JIAUKUS, the Americans are also very clear now that they don't see a military role, or certainly a treaty role for India as of now, or for that matter for Japan. So which is why I think the meeting of the Quad will have to thrash out these issues. How do Quad and AUKUS, how do they complement each other? Will AUKUS be the hard end, the big stick, and will Quad be the soft end, the carrot as it were? And how will all of this be viewed in Beijing? So there's going to be a lot on the plate, because these two groupings, to my mind, will decide the course of how Asia sort of progresses over the next year or so. Remember, this is a big year coming up for China, and particularly for Xi Jinping, as he counts down to the big party congress that's going to happen sort of middle of next year. He wants to project to the world Chinese supremacy and Chinese power. And the two things that are appending that, or standing in the way as it were, are one, AUKUS, because it's a military alliance. Bringing in a nuclear submarine into the South or East China Sea is like somebody bringing in a machine gun into a pistol fight. It changes the battlefield altogether. So that's something that Beijing will have to really think hard about. At the same time, bringing in the complementarities that the Quad offers, and these big 4 countries. Remember, between Japan, India, US and Australia, we're talking about what, a fourth, if not a third of the global economy. So there is going to be pressure on China, both on the security architecture front as well as on the economic as well as soft power front, on how to confront this coming together of nations to try and confront this bullying and almost hegemonic behavior that we're seeing that China has been displaying over the last few years or so. So it's going to be interesting times, both in the Western front, as I explained, where it is advantage India because the US is finally realizing the double game that Pakistan has been playing. And on the Eastern front, there's going to be a lot more push and pulls, a lot more give and take that has to happen between Quad and AUKUS to figure out how to stand up to a country which clearly thinks it is the emerging superpower of the world.